We are ready to begin our next adventure in math, and today we are starting something new. We are going to be working with something called ratios, rates, and unit rates. Now, ratios and fractions behave a lot the same way. The difference between a ratio and a fraction is a ratio compares something to something else using division, versus a fraction compares something to a whole. So we are only going to look at the comparison of two things. Now, to help us see the difference between ratios and rates and fractions, we write them differently. So there are three ways that you can write a ratio. You can use words for 2, you can use a symbol such as a colon for 2, or you can use a division bar 4 to 2. Now, my preference is to use the words or the symbol. It just helps me see the difference between a fraction and a ratio. Remember, the fraction compares something to a whole. A ratio is just comparing something to something else. So just like fractions though, ratios can also have equivalent ratios. So if I had the ratio 4 to 6, I can find equivalent ratios either by using division, and you would divide both parts of the ratio by the same number. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 4 to 6 and 2 to 3 equal the same amount. They're the same equivalent ratio. I could also, though, use multiplication. So if I took 4 to 6 and I multiplied both sides by 2, I would get 8 to 12. 2 to 3, 4 to 6, and 8 to 12 are equivalent ratios. They mean the same amount. Now, when we go to write a ratio in lowest terms, just like fractions, we always have to write it in our simplest form. And so we would choose the 2 to 3 form for a final answer, although we could work with the other forms as we're doing calculations. Now, when we go to compare ratios, it's really hard to compare two things when they're in ratio form. So the best thing that we can do is always convert those ratios to decimals. And we do it just like we do with fractions in that we divide. So if I take 209 and divide it by 30, I get 6 97/100ths. If I take 47 divided by 12, I get 3 92/100ths. Once we're in decimal form, it's really easy to compare the fractions, and we can use our greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to signs for that. Now, rates are a type of ratio. The only difference with rates is we are comparing two things that have different units of measure. Notice on a ratio, I didn't have to have a unit of measure at all. But on a rate, I have to have a unit of measure, and both of those parts of the ratio have to have a different one. So here are three examples of rates. We have 150 heartbeats per 2 minutes. We have 420 calories per 6 servings. We have 200 miles per 8 gallons. So whenever we're just comparing two different things with different units of units of measurement, we just say that's a rate. Now, all rates can also be taken down to unit rates. And all that simply means is that we're going to compare something to one. So I can take any rate and I can make it a unit rate, and I simply do that by thinking, well, how do I go from 2 minutes to 1 minute? Well, if I divide by 2, I will get 1. But remember, whatever you do to one part in math, you have to do to the other part. And so I would also have to divide 150 heartbeats by 2. And when I do that, I get 75 heartbeats per 1 minute. It's like an equivalent ratio. We just kind of think of it as equivalent rates, where our unit rate is always being compared to 1. And I can do that with any of them. So as long as you take that bottom number and you divide it by the same number, but you have to do it on both parts, you're always going to create your unit rate for that. Now you could also go the reverse direction as well. You could be given a unit rate and you could take it up to any type of rate. So you're going to be working going back and forth between the two. You can see there's a lot of similarities between fractions and ratios. Always think of a ratio as just a comparison of two things, and probably choose the two different ways of writing it so you don't get it confused with the fraction. But as long as you know how to work with fractions, you pretty much know how to work with ratios. Now it's up to you. Are you ready for the challenge?